I haven't seen my picture at all this time. Get lost. What's that? What is that? Aha, there we are. That's better.
Says live now.
Citrix Workspace.
Okay, I was just checking the feed. We are live now, so I shall move over to you, Chairman.
We got this blank screen now. Citrix Workspace on it. What's that?
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Policy and Resources Committee meeting, Monday the 7th of September 2020. And welcome to any members of the public who are out there. You should have all received the revised agenda, which has got an urgent item on it about the homelessness prevention panel, which I agreed to. And also you should have the new food safety policy, which has actually got the track changes, because there are quite a few. So it'll be a good idea if everyone is muted unless they want to speak. You'll have to speak when you want to speak, because we can't raise a hand easily, and because we can't see everybody, so if you put your hand up in the air, you can't guarantee to actually see it, so you'll have to speak out and then we'll go in turn. So if we move on now to item 1, any apologies for absence, please, Ben?
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from councillors David Brackenbury and Roger Glitheroe.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on now to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July. And you have quite a big pack there, most of which are subcommittee and working party minutes, CCTV policy and support for freedom leisure. So everybody happy that I sign these as a true record?
Yes.
Yes.
Happy.
Anyone not happy, please speak. No. Okay, thank you very much then. I'll sign those as a true record when appropriate. Item 3, any declarations of interest, please?
Yes, so I'm a trustee, it's Dudley here, I'm a trustee of Service 6. So item 7, new agenda.
Yep.
Yes, I declare an interest, Councillor Peacock, in Serve, as they're based in the town. We do have contact with them quite regularly.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay, thank you very much then. Item 4, questions by members under Council Procedure Rule 10.3.
There are none, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on now to item 5, which is the urgent item. I've been involved discussing this on and off, and I think it's appropriate that we get this done as soon as possible. And it's actually the minutes of the homelessness prevention panel. So I'll ask Councillor Greenwood-Smith to introduce these minutes, and it has got a report attached which Carol should cover. So I'll hand over to you, Councillor Greenwood-Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you especially for including this in the agenda at such short notice. It is much appreciated. The night shelter has been closed since March 2020, and we're trying to get it reopened before the weather gets bad again. ENCS were already looking for new premises, and the premises in Duck Street have become available, 89 to 91. And from that point of view, there are some financial matters which will need taking a look at. We are pretty happy that it will be pretty much cost neutral and that we could have the shelter open in October and early November. The minutes have recommendations 1, 2 and 3 at the end of them, but in the meantime I will hand to Carol Conway, if I may, who will go through the detail and the nitty-gritty.
Okay, over to you then, Carol. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, as members are aware, the Council has supported the work of the Rushden Night Shelter for some years now through homelessness prevention grants. and we currently contribute £5,000 per annum towards the night shelter operating costs, a further £5,000 towards their costs for counselling, and £2,000 per annum for the sweat provision, which is when the weather is particularly severe. We've also been successful in a funding application under the government's Rough Sleeping Initiative for a joint project under which ENCS employ an outreach worker to assist rough sleepers and those who are at risk of rough sleeping. In recent years, councillors have expressed concerns about the standard of accommodation at the night shelter, and this has led an ENCS to seek alternative premises. They were hoping to move into the SERV premises, which would also have enabled them to provide day centre facilities. However, because of the high level of financial risk involved, they've decided not to proceed with that. As Councillor Greenwood-Smith said, as a result of the pandemic, the night shelter closed at the end of March and it won't reopen in its current premises. It's impossible to social distance there because there are shared bedrooms and facilities, and it's also a very difficult space to try and keep clean and sanitise regularly. They've also got an ongoing issue around resourcing of staff and volunteers. So they've been looking for new premises, although their plans for a day centre are on hold for now. They hope to provide two things really, an element of short-term or temporary night shelter provision, but also some longer-term supported accommodation for up to 2 years for people who find it difficult to manage and cope. So 89 and 91 Duck Street are now owned by the council and are currently leased to the Mayday Trust, who wish to invoke the break clause in their lease. The properties are in an ideal location for a night shelter, and as such they could be a good medium-term use for the properties until any further development plans are put in place for the adjacent land, which is also in the council's ownership. The properties comprise of 6 individual bedrooms, 3 in each property, together with living rooms, kitchens, bathrooms in each. One property also has some office and sleep-in space for staff. So they're considered suitable for the 2 separate uses that the night shelter is looking for the temporary accommodation and the more supported accommodation, with staff being based in the night shelter but being on hand if they were needed next door. The properties are currently let at a rent of £1,300 per month. And this is something that we would need to look into further for the council to decide whether to continue to charge rent to the night shelter, and if so, at what level. The majority of the rent could be claimed back by ENCS through housing benefit, but there is a problem there because they're not a housing association, so the council wouldn't receive full subsidy back for those payments. However, we are in discussions with Longhurst to see whether a head and sublease arrangement could be put in place, and this would enable the council to claim the full subsidy on the housing benefit. There is currently a very similar arrangement in place for the recovery house, which members are familiar with. So there are currently 2 residents still at Duck Street, but they're both being offered alternative accommodation. There'll be some repair works needed before they can be reoccupied. CCTV needs to be installed, but as Councillor Greenwood-Smith said, we would hope that we'd be in a position to open a night shelter late October, early November, giving us that winter provision which is needed. And also giving some breathing space whilst longer term arrangements are considered either at Duck Street or elsewhere by the Shadow Authority. Due to the decline that the night shelter have experienced in recruiting volunteers, the night shelter would only be viable if it could be properly staffed overnight. And it's estimated that this would cost about £7,300 per month. Daytime staff provision would be similar to the current operation at approximately 3,500 a month. And this would mean that there would be a shortfall not paid by housing benefit of about 3,500 a month. And that would equate to about 17,500 from the 1st of November to the 31st of March. And then there would be a small amount of setup costs as well. So the council has already allocated £5,000 from the Homelessness Prevention Grant funding towards the operation of the night shelter in the current financial year. There is approximately £15,000 unspent in the Homelessness Prevention Grant Fund, which has been carried over, small amounts have been carried over each year. And it's proposed that this funding could be made available to the night shelter up to the end of this financial year. ENCS would also undertake their own fundraising to make the project sustainable in the longer term. We've yet to determine how the SWEP will be provided this year due to the loss of the Full Gospel Church Hall facility. So one of the recommendations is that the funding allocated for the SWEP would be retained by the council until proposals are in place on how this would be provided. So there are some recommendations on the report. Firstly, that when the Duck Street properties become available, they're leased to either to ENCS or to Longhurst and then sublet to ENCS, and that would be for initial 18-month period to help longer term arrangements to be put in place, and that £15,000 of the remaining Homelessness Prevention Grants Fund is allocated to them as set up an additional running cost for the period to the 31st of March 2021, and that the funding allocated for the SWEP is retained by ENC until proposals are in place on how this will be provided.
Chairman.
Okay, that it, Carol?
Yep.
Right, thank you very much. First of all, I'll take the leader then, please. I did catch the hand there. And then I've got Councillor Peacock, then Councillor Harrison.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very good report. I think Carol, you said or in relation to Longhurst taking on the property and subletting back to ENCS, and obviously I've read the report, and I think from my point of view, not necessarily a priority, but I think that would be one of the most important points from this, Chairman, is that that Longhurst, as a provider, take that on and lease it back. So obviously there is opportunity to get some of that income or all that income in relation to housing benefit, which would, in my view, would be a good way of contributing to offset the funding stream or the funding that is required. You know, trying to do some kind of future proofing here. You know, it's obviously very clear in relation to the end of this council, but we're looking obviously at an 18-month you know, kind of settlement here to cover that provision, and obviously going into Northlands Unitary, and I don't know what the other councils provide in relation to night shelter, but then everybody's got issues in each of the towns, so obviously a combined night shelter wouldn't necessarily work. So from my point of view, I think it's probably, you know, pretty key that you know, it's linked to a provider, so that funding can be drawn back, in my view. Apart from that, I haven't got a great deal to add. I know the sites, and I've rechecked them, and you know, in relation to, you know, Duck Street's not too dissimilar to, you know, High Street South in Rushden, which, as you've said, members, including me, have raised issues with that, Chairman. So I think overall, it's just you know, it would be helpful, very helpful, if Longhurst managed to take on that provision, and then we look to sublet it back to ENCS. Thanks, Chairman.
Would you like to come back on that one, Carol? Please?
Yes, please, Chair. Just to say that we have had some initial discussions with Longhurst, and they do seem to be amenable to taking on the property. So we need to meet with them again and really sort of bottom that out as to exactly how it would it would work, and what we need to put in place to make that happen. So that I would anticipate bringing a further report back to this committee with the proposals for how that would work.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we have brought this forward, I suppose, fairly quickly, so that's why there are one or two questions that haven't been fully answered. But so I'll move on to Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I welcome this proposal. It's disappointing to hear that the Church Street one's not going ahead, because that was an ideal one. They've got the facilities to offer the day centre, and I think that is something that moving forward we desperately need to look at, because especially during the winter months, that's when we're getting most of the problems. And even in the summer months, on the chilly days, you know, they do need somewhere to go during the day as well. So but I welcome that we are going to be able to offer something during those the winter months ahead of us, and probably gives us breathing space, as you say, to find somewhere a bit more long term. I think the other issue is the situation of where it is. As we all know, it's being used by various groups to provide accommodation. There have been issues down there though, and I think we just need to make sure that the management in there is top notch to a certain extent. You have got the extra care centre there with residents, and the next door neighbour, I know over the years have had a lot of disruption, so I think that's got to be a priority as well, that's, you know, looked into, which I'm sure it will be, but I just needed to.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to comment on that one at all, Carol?
Yes, if I could, Chair, just to say that
Councillor Greenwood-Smith, I have your hand. Thank you.
yes, just to say that in its current usage, there is no resident supervision there, whereas the proposal for the night shelter would be that there would be 2 members of staff on call all night, at least one waking, if not both. So any issues that there have been in the past should be mitigated by that, and because the 2 properties are linked by a communal porch, although they would be in one property, they'd easily be able to get into the other property if there was an issue there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Carol, for the report. You mentioned in the report, Carol, that one of the problems is staffing and volunteers, a lack of staff and volunteers. Clearly, that's going to be absolutely crucial in delivering this project and making it viable. And this is a really important project, as other councillors have said. The winter months are coming. We can already feel the change in the weather now, and we really do need something up and running. But if we go ahead with this and the staff and volunteers can't be recruited, where's that going to leave things?
Yes, Carol, please.
Well, ENCS are confident that they will be able to recruit paid staff, which is why the proposal is being put in this way. But that's part of the reason as well why we're asking for an initial 18-month period for the lease, so that actually means that they've got a sufficient period in which to appoint staff, because if we were only looking at providing something over the winter months, then that would be quite difficult to actually recruit to for such a short time. But they are confident that they will be able to find the staff. I mean, they also run the night shelter at Corby, and you may recall that the opening of that was delayed again because of volunteer issues. Just not having enough volunteers to be able to open safely, and so I think Corby Council decided to put some money into the project to enable paid staff to be recruited, and obviously since then it has been open and has been very successful.
I think as well it's a better location for staff than the previous ones, and it's probably a safer location because of where it's actually positioned. So Councillor Greenwood-Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just would like to reinforce Carol's words with the fact that we will also be installing CCTV, which will actually also help to mitigate any nuisance to the neighbours. But going back to Councillor Peacock's point, the Serve building would have been very good. As you say, it would have provided the day centre without any difficulty at all, but the refurbishment costs were substantial, and it was very difficult, or actually proved, I believe it, this is third-hand information, so I'm being careful what I say, I believe it proved impossible to come to an arrangement to take the lease, because A, it required a 10-year lease for anyone to invest or give any grants for redoing the premises, but a 10-year lease wasn't viable for the people at ENCS to feel confident that they could support it for 10 years. So it was one of those rock and a hard place scenarios. But I also think it's very important, closing comment, I think it's very important that we have a night shelter going in our district before Northamptonshire comes into being, because there are facilities at Kettering, Corby and others, and if we didn't have one, it may be more difficult to get one, possibly under the new regime. If we have one here, we can passport it through, and hopefully it will be able to continue under the new Northamptonshire banner.
Do you want to comment on that one, Carol, or?
No, I think Chandler's put that perfectly. Thank you.
I've got Councillor North wishes to speak, but there are several people I can't see. So has anyone else got their hand up? No, in that case, I'll go back to Councillor North. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and miss me, I didn't mention it the first time around. I think the government quite rightly said, obviously with COVID, that and all the funding support that happened to get people off the streets that were unfortunately homeless, they did say that they obviously would hope that we didn't have to go back to homelessness, that nobody should be homeless anymore in relation to post-COVID, and you know, that should, I would suggest, require some more government funding. So I don't know if any more government funding is due, or any talk of any more extra support from the government, because that would not happen. To end homelessness would not happen without further funding from the government, Chairman. So if that's what they meant by that in relation to COVID, then hopefully there should be something forthcoming in relation to extra support. And secondly, Chairman, just a point for Ben. Wendy's dropped me a line and said she still can't get into the meeting, so sorry for that introduction, but if someone could still look into that, because obviously Wendy can't take part at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor North. I mean, the inference is from the government that there might be a bit more money, but I'll let Carol reply to that one.
Yes, there's a couple of funding pots coming up. I mean, there hopefully will be the Rough Sleepers Initiative funding, which is what we're currently using to fund the outreach worker. There's also some funding under what they're calling Next Steps. And that's more sort of involved with capital funding. So again, that is something that we'll be looking at to potentially make a bid for the next financial year. You know, and we can look at how we're going to provide night shelter facilities going forward, or more longer term accommodation. And I think, you know, we did a great job during the lockdown of making sure that everybody was in, or at least everybody that would engage with us was in. You know, and at the moment we only have one identified known rough sleeper in the district. However, I think we can't be complacent about that, and we've got furlough ending and redundancies on the horizon. We're also going to be looking at the eviction ban being lifted on the 20th of this month, unless that's extended again. So we are anticipating a considerable rise in homelessness figures going forward. And, you know, we will need somewhere to put people. So this will be a great help to us.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've got no other hands that I can see. Is anyone else wish to speak?
Chairman.
All right, Councillor Jenny, yes. Please fire away. I can see you now.
I have been trying. Been trying for some time.
Well, if I put chat up, it seems to block the screen out, so.
well, perhaps we should do without the chat. I have a major. I understand what Carol's saying, and I'm generally in support of the majority of the report. However, I have a major concern about location. These two buildings are 50 yards one way from the entrance to Splash, and 50 yards the other way from the entrance to one of the major youth clubs in the town. In the past, we have had quite significant social misbehaviour by some of these people. Unfortunately, but at the end of the day, most of them are in a position where they need the night shelter because of their habits. So I'm concerned that we would risk people using Splash and people going to the rush to the den with their children, and I think that is a significant concern. I think the actual buildings themselves fine, although in effect you would be having another HMO in your ward, Mr. Chairman, so please remember that.
Open season, you should know that.
Well, that's absolutely right. And the other thing that concerns me, and I don't know the answer to this, perhaps I should know the answer to this, but my maths says that if we're going to be doing this for 18 months, we're going to be over the limit that the unitary is set for capital projects. So I'm suspecting that we would probably have to go back to the unitary to get clearance to do this. Now, I don't think that would be a problem, but I think it's a process that we might just have to go through. So just
okay, thank you very much.
The warning on that one.
I've got Councillor Greenwood-Smith would like to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak? No, I'll go back to Carol. No, okay, Carol, if you'd like to answer Councillor Jenny's comments, please.
Well, I think, you know, it's difficult to know what people will do outside the buildings, but then, you know, I think the supervision within the buildings will be a lot better than it has been in the past, because they will have those overnight staff, and, you know, I would hope that if there were issues in the locality, then they would, you know, ENCS would work with the night shelter residents, and also with you know, those facilities that were experiencing difficulties, to try and resolve those issues.
Okay.
But those haven't been taken into consideration.
I think it's a very difficult one, that, because at the moment you've got people there who are unsupervised, whereas we're talking about moving to a supervised situation. But yes, it's very difficult. You know, how long is a piece of string in this case? But you know, that's part of the risk, I suppose.
Till the 1st of April.
Well, that's what it says in the recommendation. Councillor Greenwood-Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted that Councillor Jenny agrees that the buildings are ideal. Regrettably, we can't pick them up and move them. So ideal is where they are, and ideal is where they stay. I actually believe that there's a possibility that there will be less difficulties being 50 yards each way, because at the moment there are no facilities in that area, and if people want to misbehave outside the Splash and outside the club, there's no one to stop them other than someone calling the police. With the 89 to 91 in close proximity, they will be coming out and or going, and there will be an opportunity for, as Carol says, for the staff within those buildings to come out and take a look and hopefully deal with the situation long before someone has to dial 999 and get the law along. So I'm rather hopeful that the presence of staff in those facilities will facilitate rather an improvement in behaviour rather than a deterioration in behaviour. I do understand, of course, that everybody will be coming and going, and there's just the minority who misbehave, but those minority will misbehave wherever we put them. We can only try to mitigate as best we can. And of course, the night shelter, although the lease is for 18 months, we're only suggesting it's supported until March 2021, which is within our financial parameters. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor Peacock then, please, and then that'll be the last speaker. Thank you.
Okay, no, I think those issues I'd already raised, that Councillor Jenny's just raised, and I think it will be down to the management. I understand what he's saying about the splash and the youth club, but I think the youth club's a lot younger element than what we're looking at. But I said, you know, it is to make sure that those that already have homes and are very vulnerable get that protection they require. And like Glenville's already said, there's never a right place. We can't pick up and move these, but we must learn. And in the meantime, we must look out for somewhere that is more suitable. And if there's a possibility with funding and extra funding coming out to use the Church Street option, then that's what we've got to look at. Or even not another site. It hasn't got to be in Rushden, it can be Rawns, it can be anywhere if somebody can come up with the right place. But this at least just gets us through the winter months through till March, doesn't it? As a minimum.
That's right. But it should be a much better place to actually in effect police, because of it, you know, it is proper houses as opposed to porter cabins in effect. So I'd now like to move you on to the resolutions. Sorry.
Councillor Bojo looking.
You can't see me, Tony Boto.
Oh, right, Councillor Boto, yes.
Yeah, in many ways, Sarah's just said what I was going to say, but I really think I do accept what Councillor Jenny has said in terms of the fact there may be some possible limitations on the site. But in the absence of any other site, I think really we are, as Mrs. Thatcher said, there's no alternative, and this seems to be the only one that's available. And I think we should go with it, and I'm prepared to move the recommendations.
Right, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak, or can I move on to the recommendations? Okay, we'll move on to the recommendations, which are in item 4, and I'm not going to read the 3 recommendations there, but do I have a proposal for those recommendations? Councillor Boto, and a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Right, Councillor North, are there any amendments to those recommendations? No. All those in favour, please?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Anyone abstained? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for presenting that, Carol.
Okay.
We move on now. Yes, thank you. We move on now to item 6 on the agenda, which is Food Safety and Health and Safety Service Plan 2021. And I asked Sam, please, to present the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Food and Health and Safety Service Plan is published every year, and it sets out how the team will deliver the service. Normally, year on year, there isn't too much that changes in the plan. However, this year is different. The plan, and rather the team's ability to deliver the plan, has been significantly affected by the COVID pandemic. The Food Standards Agency directed all local authorities to cease inspections during the lockdown period. So there will be a backlog of inspections at the end of the financial year. Visits will be prioritised according to risk and of course weighed against the ongoing required COVID response. New businesses have been and will continue to be supported virtually. The health protection team have played a key role in the COVID response, keeping up to date with the ever-changing legislation and guidance. They've been advising businesses, supporting businesses and supporting members of the public. They've also been carrying out compliance checks and assisting partners with the COVID outbreak response, and this has been crucial to ensuring that we stay on top of the virus transmission and avoid any local restrictions. The committee are requested to recommend that the council approve the plan, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. I suppose the thing is, it was inevitable that some of our policies would be quite affected by COVID, and so this is the first one really, which has a lot of references there. So do I have any questions on this, please? Councillor Harrison and Councillor Peacock, I can see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to start by thanking the team for all they've done through the COVID crisis. I know that through my work for the local MP, that when we've reported worrying situations, that the two councils that we've dealt with have dealt with things very swiftly and, you know, really made an important difference during this time. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and pass on my appreciation to the team. I did want to just, first of all, query on point 7.1, where it talks about interventions agreed on for 2018-19. I presume that's a typo. It's presumably 2021 or 21-22 rather than 18-19.
That's a good question. 7.1, Sam, as it says the work plan for 2018-19.
Sorry, can you just tell me that, which paragraph number was it again?
7.1.
7.1, yes, that is an error and I'll get that changed.
I did spot, well spotted, Councillor Harrison.
Fine. And then I just wanted to say, I mean, quite clearly, you're going to have a backlog of work that's building up. That's absolutely understandable. And very wisely, you're going to be targeting the more at-risk elements of the work that you have to do. So I was wondering if there's, looking into the future, I realise, again, very, very difficult given that the councils are all changing, but is there any plan in the future to try to catch that all up? And then the other thing that I noticed, that you haven't managed to fill the post of the health protection officer yet, which is going to be important in helping you to catch up with some of this work. And I wondered if there'd been any movement on that, any interest. So if you could just perhaps fill me in on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrison. Sam, would you like to comment on those, please? Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you for the thanks, and I will pass that on to the team, Councillor Harrison. In respect of a plan to catch up, I did say in my report, and I still stand by that we will endeavour to catch up with the inspection programme when we resume inspections, which hasn't happened yet. And each time we try to think that we're in a position to do that, something else in relation to COVID happens, and the team obviously needs to respond to that first and foremost at this current time. As time moves on, I think we will perhaps start to do some inspections along with COVID work, but at this moment in time it's very difficult for me to predict what's going to happen in relation to COVID. If we get a second wave, then I think it's unlikely that we'd be able to resume inspections as I would like to. So I'm afraid in terms of the plan at the moment it really is just focusing on COVID for the foreseeable future until things change. Hopefully, if we don't have a second wave, then the inspections can resume. So that's as much as I can say in relation to that. You've picked up on the point about an officer being not in post at the moment, and that's actually not related to the food work directly, because that's a post for a health and wellbeing officer. Unfortunately, I went through the whole recruitment process, and despite the fact that I had a number of applicants, I did actually offer the post to a successful applicant, but then that applicant had already got a job elsewhere, and with COVID and everything, I haven't had time to go through the recruitment process again, and I'm really taking a view as to whether or not that's the right thing to do at this juncture because of unitary, and I think it's going to be difficult to try and attract people to come and have an interview when they're faced with a situation where we've got unitary obviously happening very soon. And I think that's partly the reason why the successful candidate did actually choose to accept a job with another organisation. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you. Yes, our thanks, Sam, to all your
And
efforts
then-
that have gone in
then
during
Councillor
COVID as well.
Jenny, who's not muted.
Thank you. I'll start again. Thank you, Sam. If you can pass on again, agree with Councillor Harrison. A lot of work. I think a lot of the public don't realise that officers have still been working during COVID. I think they think you've all been furloughed and don't realise you haven't been. So I think that's something that needs sending through the whole chain through Mr. Oliver as well. I'm sure he'll pass that on as well. Just a couple of typos really. On page 9, you've got at the bottom there, you've got the chart below shows the growth. Well, the chart is actually on the other page, is on page 10. So again, that just needs a bit of lining up, so nothing too technical. And just really, how many of these level 2 food and hygiene courses do we do, or are people tending to do more online? Because I know you can do them online a lot quicker.
That they are tending to do them online now, Councillor Peacock. In fact, what we try to do is save people up when they want to come and do a course, and so that we've got a number that makes it worthwhile running the course. But in recent times, for about the last year, we haven't actually had enough people interested in doing a course for us to run it, and I don't see us running it anytime soon. I think really that's going to have to be something that's picked up as part of the whole unitary programme.
Okay, I just wondered whether it was still worth leaving it if it's something that people are not really taking the offer upon. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I've got Councillor Jenny, please.
Just one question, please. Table 7.1, we seem to have taken out the asbestos awareness. I just wondered why, because building industry is still full of asbestos.
Well, if I'm honest, Councillor Jenny, I don't know why myself. I think that the way that the priorities are organised is based on what we agree for the whole of Northamptonshire. So I don't remember off the top of my head why we decided to take asbestos particularly out of the work plan for health and safety. I mean, all I would say is we don't do a huge amount of reactive health and safety work now. We do mainly proactive interventions, although in recent times we haven't done too much of that. So I don't know. If you would like me to look into the reason particularly, then I can do that, but off the top of my head I don't remember the exact reason.
Yeah, okay, I think that'd be a good idea to
If I was going to be suspicious, I would think it's probably the county council not having asbestos reports for all the buildings it's going to pass over to the unitary.
That was a slightly cynical remark, which I think we might. The
county council wouldn't have fed into that, because it's only the districts and boroughs that deliver health and safety. The county council don't deliver that function, Councillor Jenny.
I'll withdraw that allegation then and just keep an eye on them myself.
I think that's a point of touche there. So anyway, if Sam could just check into the situation with the asbestos. Does anyone else wish to speak? No. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, I'll move you then to the recommendation in 11, which is a resolve to recommend to council that the Food Safety and Health and Safety Service Plan 2020-21 be approved. So I'd have a proposer for that, please.
Lovely.
Councillor Peacock, second to Councillor Harrison. Any amendments to that? All those in favour?
Aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's passed. Thank you very much. And as I say, on behalf of the committee, pass our thanks on to the team there. Sam
Yeah.
for carrying on regardless. Thank you very much.
Indeed.
We'll move on now to item 7, which is financial contributions to voluntary sector organisations. And I'd like to call on Mike to present this paper, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, as the Chairman says, this report is around our voluntary sector organisations and the ones that we have our community support grants with and the service level agreements. Now, members will be familiar with the background to all of this, so I won't go over that in too much detail, but sufficient is it to say that the current agreements, of course, will come to an end on the 31st of March next year, in line with the council moving over to unitary. This is more of an opportunity more than anything, Chairman. This is where we have an opportunity to make a recommendation to the new Shadow Authority to include provisions for a further year's extension, if you like, an in principle extension into the draft budget of the North Northamptonshire Council. And this will be in line with our fellow North Northamptonshire councils. Corby a while ago gave their blessing for an extension to all their grants. Kettering have just recently done it, and Wellingborough are considering it too. So it would be in line with our North Northamptonshire partners. So the way forward really is to make that recommendation to the North Northamptonshire Shadow Authority. We do that on the basis of the current levels that we have in place now. So we won't be proposing any changes to the service level agreements or grant agreements or the monetary values that go alongside that too. But I also would like to stress that this is about the organisations that we are working with, and we've done a huge amount of work with these organisations to get these grants and service level agreements developed. They've continued with the same providers. The performance, as reported to members frequently, has been outstanding. They almost certainly exceeded performance that's been set in many occasions. I've never had cause to bring a report back through you, Chair, to Policy and Resources Committee asking for any determination of those grants or agreements in the history that they've been going. So really it's about putting that on the table for the North Northants Authority so it has the time to continue to work with these organisations, but also develop the future relationship and the long-term relationship that it might want with these organisations and the sector generally. Just to point out that item or paragraph 6 there, of course, there is a critical issue at stake, is that the grant agreements do and service level agreements do come to an end next year, and there is the potential for further reduced capacity if further funding wouldn't be available to those organisations based on so I have done a full equalities impact assessment. There's also many contributions from these organisations towards health and health improvement. So equally, I've done a health impact assessment at Appendix 2. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 15, Chairman. So if members do have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them through yourself. Thank you.
Right. I can't actually see any hands on my screen, but there's any Councillor Jenny, thank you. And Councillor Harrison, I have then, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, fully support this paper. If we fail to do this, most of these organisations will be in an exceedingly bad financial status for sorting out their monies for next year. So to a certain extent, it's like the town and parish councils. They need to know that their funding, anything that's coming through, is not going to be impeded by the unitary. So I'm absolutely wholeheartedly behind this. I will support this at the unitary council being taken through into the medium-term financial structures as they come through. I think that's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jenny. Councillor Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Like Councillor Jenny, I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to wholeheartedly support this proposal. All of these services that are provided to our public are vital for mental and physical health and well-being of our community, and I think they deliver way beyond the the sort of monetary value that's put against their services. So I would be very keen to see this report supported, and that we do recommend the continuation of these services into the first year of the Unitary Council.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to comment on this? Okay, in that case, I'll move on to 15, which is the recommendations. And the first one is to consider the full equalities impact assessment set out in Appendix 1. And of course, this is a case where there are some quite significant implications. Secondly, to approve an in-principle extension to our current community support grant agreements and service level agreements with the voluntary sector organisations set out in this report. And thirdly, to make a recommendation of the North Northampton Shadow Authority that the financial provisions to cover the agreement extensions referred to in recommendation 2 above are included in the 2021-22 draft budget for the new North Northamptonshire Council. Do I have a proposer for those recommendations?
Proposed, Chairman.
Councillor North, a seconder.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jenny. Any amendments to the proposals? Okay, all those in favour, please.
Aye.
Yep. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. They're all carried. And that brings us to the end of the agenda. It's been a unique meeting this evening. Councillors Hughes and Mercer have not actually spoken. This sets a record in 10 years. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance. Please keep safe, and I'm sure you will all have a safe journey home. On that basis, I hereby close the meeting. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
You.
Bye.
We didn't drop out the live feed, Ben.
Hi, Wendy.
Bye.